Well, the Republicans raised the roof in Milwaukee this week at their convention. Much talk about unity, much gratefulness that Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt. But amidst all that hoopla and the speeches, Nina, did they showcase a kinder and gentler party?
Well, it did strike me as a party that was much less divisive in terms of the speeches than what we've seen in the past. I also was struck by the celebratory mood, the fact that there were so many people dancing, or at least trying to dance. And there seems to have been a positive, I hate to say this, but I think they all mentioned it, a positive impact of the assassination attempt that made people think beyond the sort of parochial thinking that is dominated in the past. And something else that I thought was new here and perhaps reflecting a kinder, gentler Republican Party is the emphasis on manufacturing jobs and having to sort of boost America's manufacturing industry. I look back at the 2016 platform and didn't see that as prominent. However, they're talking a kinder, gentler Republican Party, but they're walking pretty much the same party that we've seen in the past. And specifically, when you look at the platform in regard to migrants, it is very, very strongly anti-migrant. It's very anti-transgender, and we can get into the details if you'd like, and also anti-DEI. So kinder and gentler in talk, but walking the same walk as the past.
I thought it was interesting, just looking back at the historian here, is looking at, we have a change of one of our major parties. And the Republican Party of Reagan, Bush, Romney is dead. I mean, there's no even sign of the corpse left anymore. You're either on the Trump side or you're not in the Republican Party. And I think that is what I saw most of all. I mean, as Karl Marx would say, that party's on the ash heap of history. And to see that now we have a Trumpian party, and if you're not on that board, then you're not in the Republican Party.
Yeah, could I put an exclamation mark at the end of what you just said? I see this as a party of one. And as you said, not the political party of the past. And here are some of the specifics that I was very, very much sort of struck by last night, that Hulk Hogan talked about Trumpites and Trump mania. Then Reverend Franklin Graham, who I don't admire quite as much as his father, Billy Graham, he explicitly prayed for Donald Trump throughout much of that prayer. And sort of praying for the world was ancillary to that. And then Eric Trump said something I thought, wow. He said that his father was the single greatest hope for the future of America and the world.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the Republican convention. I actually, unfortunately or fortunately, watched the whole thing. There is something going on here, I feel like. There were cases where, there were speeches where people didn't mention tax cuts. They didn't mention reducing government spending, especially I remember Vance's speech. So there are some things, and abortion, they want to stay away from those topics. But on the other hand, it is the crucible of the king coronation, the coronation of Trump the king. The party is surrounded around him. Now he is chosen by God because he had survived an assassination attempt. And there were lies after lies. For example, immigrants bringing in fentanyl and killing our communities. Untrue. 90% of all fentanyl comes through by US citizens by the ports of entry. So there were tons and tons of these kind of anti-immigrant lies and a sort of, that same old, siege mentality, like, of a sea of white people with a smattering of black and brown here and there. But they also want to, we can talk about it a little bit later, they want to kind of pivot to as if saying that they are now pro-labor party, which is kind of dystopic, but I think it's more of a screensaver than anything else, but we can come to that in a little bit. But I thought these interesting things happening in the convention.
Luke, you've been to several conventions, so I'm interested in your take on how you saw this as different.
Well, one thing I was looking at the nature of the convention. I was wondering how COVID and the 2020 conventions might change how each party approaches the convention, because last time it was much more virtual, a lot more multimedia, because obviously there was more spacing. this is, thinking of history, Ty, kind of the throwback to the way things were. So a little bit more use of multimedia and that type of stuff, but I thought it looked more like 2016 than 2020. In terms of the political dynamics, one thing that stood out to me is Donald Trump is the front runner. And we can criticize aspects of the Republican Party platform, but I think he deserves a lot of credit for being in this position. I wouldn't have predicted that months ago, and I think that shaped the overall organization, which was quite strong, and the messaging of the Republican Party. They're trying to bring people together, cast a wider net. Why? Because they're just trying to cruise to victory, though I think as we anticipate, things might change drastically if Biden steps aside.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, is to look how unified the Republicans are, how all together in one, moving in the same direction, and the Democrats are in disarray. And if you had told me that 4 years ago, I would not have believed after January 6th that the Republicans would be on the Trump train, all happy. And it was a happy convention, it really was. And compare that to the Democrats, who are right now in disarray.
Could I also go back to something that Luke just said and drill down on it? I think some of what we're seeing with the policy positions is casting a wider net, and specifically in the areas where Biden has been strong. So I sort of thought, okay, we've got Kid Rock, we've got the guy who did wrestling, who's like among the most important speakers in terms of lineup, but Biden has seen increases in support of the youth, so I figured that could speak to that. But also the abortion softening on the part of Trump. Now, of course, the truth is that they've won the battle because now Roe has been taken down, but I saw some of what you were talking about.